Let's pull together the important topics of today and add the final brushstrokes to our risk-taking artwork. What we need is a methodology which can incorporate the majority of what we have discussed: risk identification, risk categorization, risk control strategies, and risk optimization. To incorporate each of these topics, let's examine the phase process model. The phase process model is comprised of 3 phases, the first of which focuses on risk identification and provides links to risk categorization and to risk control. In phase 1, the recognition of threats, or the capital R within the acronym REC, focuses on how we identify risk. Methodologies may include scientific studies, operational observations, historical events, personal experiences, anecdotal information, and regulatory requirements. There may be others, but these 6 will set you on your way to analyzing the risks that need to be considered when trying to optimize them for your operations. Phase 2 concentrates on the aspects of your operations that must be evaluated, or where risk, if you will, resides. The factors of work or production generally include equipment, material, personnel, and processes. When coupled with the enterprise risk management view, your analysis will be expanded to include both internal and external considerations in phase 2. Lastly, phase 3 examines risk control strategies, and it is within phase 3 that you will begin to see risk optimization come to fruition. Though decisions may have been made not to undertake tasks because they are too risky or the risk reward is just too small, those activities you do undertake, however, must be controlled. How do we control operations? Phase 3 of the phase process model highlights 4 basic control strategies. These include physical controls, administrative controls, those controls which are training-oriented, and educational controls. The phase process model speaks directly to the art and the science of risk-taking and risk optimization. It provides a path for recognizing your organization's risks and then assists in strategically evaluating the risk magnitude and control methodologies. In fact, the phase process integrates and utilizes all of the discussion points in today's presentation. As with the great works of art, the strategies you develop to analyze, control, and optimize risk will last a lifetime, but will require maintenance. The effort you employ to recognize and control risk is not static. As with any systems approach, there are feedback dynamics that will continually encourage you to keep the process of risk identification and risk control alive. You will find that events, near misses, and intelligence gathering and analysis are 3 primary feedback and analysis sources. It has been proven unwise to ignore events that you may have weathered or those that have occurred to others. It is further unwise to dispense with the lessons of near misses, which are harbingers of things to come, and to waste intelligence gathering, whether passive or active. Your artwork is complete. Risk should not be shunned, nor should it be ignored. Great nations, people, and organizations were built on the back of risk-taking. Of course, much of the art of risk-taking is found in when to act on risk, how much risk to take, and ultimately how to control, to the fullest extent possible, the risks you do undertake. The lessons surrounding risk have been great, and we should heed the warnings and the success stories. More importantly, You should develop a systematic approach to analyzing risk, and by doing so, you will forever be the artist with the picture that is understood and valued by many. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our first question of the second session is from Mexico. It's from the Universidad Tecnológica de Nezahualcóyotl in the city of Nezahualcóyotl in the state of Mexico, Mexico.
Sí, buenos días. Miramos de la Universidad Tecnológica de Nezahualcóyotl.
The question is the following. What possibilities do we have of really making accomplishments in a place where there is no culture, and what is our attitude? What should our attitude be in order to accomplish this?
Okay, I think I can handle that one. And I really believe that if there is not a culture, and let's assume we're talking about risk-taking here a little bit, and one of the ways to overcome that lack of risk-taking culture is to do two things. One is to seek small wins, find things that you can win at, because then you start to build that culture. And then secondarily, let's go back to the issue of control. Those risks you do take, make sure you understand the different kinds of controls we talked about. But I really think biting off that bit you can chew and manage is probably going to be the strongest thing.
I think that, yeah, I mean, there we go. Our next question is from the Dominican Republic. It is from Codatel in the city of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic.
Buenas tardes. Nuestra pregunta es la siguiente.
Our question is the following. What is the differentiating element that includes the success factor among corporations who apply methodologies and risk management and those who ignore these techniques or don't just know them?
Yeah, go ahead.
The major differences are this. You can surveil where you are not succeeding. In other words, if you have a methodology and you're applying it and things aren't going quite right, you can analyze where you need to go back and to fix things. If you don't have a methodology, it's almost impossible to figure out where things have gone wrong, and you're sort of just hoping that things work out by shirt sleeve approaches, which is not obviously management, which is planning, leading, organizing, and controlling. So I think by having that structure, you have things you can measure, you can do some good surveillance, and you can go back and find out what's gone well, maintain that, and then go fix the things that aren't going well.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mexico. It's from the Universidad de Occidente. It's in the city of Los Moches, in the state of Sinaloa, in Mexico.
Sí, gracias. Sí, la pregunta es la siguiente.
How can you create a risk culture within a university, particularly when you think you expect knowledge to resolve concrete problems? Thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask Nigel to jump in on this as well if he'd like to, but I believe creating a risk culture comes from having a clear vision. The dynamic of risk-taking is not one that is really subject to hopscotching around. You want to have a goal, you want to have objectives, and that means you have to have a vision. You have to know where you want to go. Now, creating that culture, I think you're right, can be a little complicating. So I don't know, Nigel, if you have some issues or some things you can talk about toward creating a culture.
I mean, I would simply say that I think first and foremost to believe that knowledge must entirely be understood as simply problem solving, I think is very limited, because the ability to identify problems in the first place comes from knowledge that is created for the sake of knowledge without necessarily, problems are obviously something that emerge out of a context which creates some type of a breakdown, but the idea that risk is involved in the creation of new knowledge has to be instilled at the level of leadership within a university, obviously. And again, if you're dealing with it from the perspective of mid-level or even a student, I would defer also to Dan's advice, which as an individual, you have to negotiate the cultural context, see what the envelope or the parameters are, and then take small risks and build incrementally from there. Because a small risk in a very risk-adverse culture can produce a rippling effect within that culture if it succeeds, especially.
Thank you. Our next question is from Argentina. It's from Grupo Provisional Nación in the city of Buenos Aires in Argentina.
Sí, buenas tardes. Es una pregunta en dos partes.
This is a two-fold question. First, in one organization, the process of identifying risk must be the responsibility of only one area, or is it, on the contrary, a task that is done by a whole team and that incorporates several visions depending on the responsibility areas that play in this? And then the second part of the question, I would like the expert speaker to tell me when he would recommend the participation of an external consultant who can facilitate building this risk matrix in general and implementing a culture of risk administration within the organization.
Okay, great question. Let me see if I can make sure I address both pieces. As to the risk identification and whether it is a one-person task and or a multi-person or multi-unit organization task, it clearly is stratifying an entire organization. So you want to have as many individuals, departments, business units as possible engaging. And there's two reasons for it. Not only to identify the risks or the hazards that are pertinent to their own operations, but where risk overlaps, where issues overlap. If you go back to the Venn diagram with natural and technical, you can use that same analogy. So clearly you want more than one individual, although there may be a leader who's taking that charge on. So engage the entire organization. As to when you might use a consultant or an outside resource, I would really think of it from a bookending perspective. Sometimes a consultant needs to come in on the front end to help get the process moving. Other times you use a consultant on the backside to, help analyze the rigor or the robustness of what you've done, and then secondarily to help you test your risk management capabilities. That could be from a prototypical perspective, or it might be an experiential perspective, one that you use them after an event has taken place. So I would think of them from a bookending perspective, setting the foundation and the fundamentals, and then measuring whether or not the things you've identified, the risks you've identified and have managed are really coming to pass.
Again, we have a question from Mexico. It is from the Universidad Tecnológica de Tecámac. It's in the city of Tecámac, in the state of Mexico, in Mexico.
I'm speaking from the Technological University of Tecámac, and my question is, what are the strategies, the economic strategies that we have to implement in order to reduce risk in the implementation of new projects that are supposed to be productive within the organization?
Well, I think I understand where you're going with the question, and it may have to do with an additive effect of risk, in that you've assumed a certain economic amount of risk, in other words, that which you can withstand if some risk actually manifests. And then as you roll in new processes and new technologies, is there an additive effect to the risk? And the answer to that is yes. Now, we have to quickly move to the control side, and I think what we do there is to realize that the control of one risk may actually work for another, so you might achieve some economies of scale. In some cases it doesn't, but you can help to manage that additive effect by reevaluating the risk sort of overlay, if you will, in which controls may help for one and or more than one.
Thank you. Again from Mexico, from La Universidad de Sonora, in the city of Hermosillo, in the state of Sonora, Mexico.
Buenos días. Greetings to the ITC organization and their associates. In Dr. Dan Hopwood's presentation about the painting, I think his recommendations apply when you have time and possibility to plan and capability to analyze the effects, both negative and positive, of risk. However, in many of these organizational situations, we encounter moments where we have to make a decision right then on the spot. I am wondering, or I am asking you, the experts, what kind of attitude or personal quality could we develop in such a way that we can be better equipped and to assume risk in a way that we would not be so inflexible and that we will not also lose opportunities or become or get into very difficult situations?
Very, very good question. I'm sorry to jump in there, but it's a very good question. And I think the issue of painting a picture applies whether you have a lot of time or not. And the reason I believe that is because you have to have a vision of where your decision-making will take you. And if that decision-making somehow implies that you're managing risk, whether in a short time frame or a protracted time frame, the picture still applies. We're just painting it more quickly than others. Now, to the backside of that, how do you take advantage of short time frames? I think it really has to do with the recognition of the things that can harm your business. Sometimes we know those intuitively. Other times we have to get help to figure them out, whether it be from resources and or other individuals. And they will help to fill in those brushstrokes that I talked about. But the picture still needs to be there, whether it's a compressed time frame or a longer time frame. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. Now we have a fax question. It's from Peru. It's from Cide in the city of Lima in Peru. It says, do most employees really want the responsibility that comes along with an aesthetic culture of creativity and risk? Nigel?
Off to Nigel.
I think the question is, again, one of culture. If a potential employee as an individual has come from a background where risk has been not tolerated, then that person perceives risk as associated with punishment, stigma. Those types of sense-making connotations go along with the idea of taking a risk, stepping outside the box. If that employee enters into an organization which wants to promote risk, of course at first that employee is going to necessarily be reticent because of his or her background. However, once the employee starts to become situated within that context and essentially starts to process the context through his or her own experience, sees that risk is in fact rewarded and that potential failures are not necessarily punished but are seen as learning opportunities, it's going to be much easier for that employee to be transformed by that culture and then start to contribute to a risk-taking culture himself.
Our next question is from Cuba. It is from Señia Internet in La Habana, or Havana, Cuba.
This is not necessarily a question, but more a comment. We believe that the topic that we have dealt with is more than interesting. It becomes a vital topic, taking into account the current international events that we have been going through in this very in this world. And I think that this risk-assuming situation is very important. We have to take into account the risks that we take when we are inhabiting a planet and when we are all living together in solidarity amongst all the different cultures, countries, and religions. So I think that at this point, the activity of the ITC must have all these things into account, and we should adopt attitudes that are a little more common. We are right now facing very difficult situations, and the experts that have participated in this video program, we would like to thank them because it has been very, very much to the point of what we're living right now. Thank you.
Dan, any comment about the application of risk to the current international situation?
Yeah, I sure appreciate those comments. I really do. And we are in intriguing times. And as we look at globalization and sort of a universal world and business opportunities and applications, there are two things I would bring into this conversation. And one is the application of risk management or increasing the art of risk-taking from a preemptive perspective. In other words, we gather information. I gave you some things to think about. basic though they may be. And we can preemptively get rid of a lot of those threats, and we should try to do that rather than simply be reactive. And preemptive is even more than proactive. So I would encourage all of us, as we look at the caller's theme of working together, that we preemptively look in the future and we find things that are going to harm societies and worlds and all of our visions and missions and try to overcome them. I think it's a great point.
Thanks. Thank you for your excellent questions, but we've run out of time. We hope that you have enjoyed participating once again in this exciting multilingual, multinational program. We invite you to participate in our 10th video conference of this year's series, which will air on November 8, 2001, entitled Knowledge Protection and Management, Market Niches, Patents, and Copyrights. For additional information on this year's video conference series, please consult your participant's manual, where you will find the dates and specific topics for each program. You may also visit our website, intectra.com. On behalf of all of us at the International Training Center, I thank you for your enthusiastic participation and interest in today's program. Thanks, and see you again soon.